Hey there everybody, welcome back with the Plat. Purplatypus is the name, and today we're going to go over the top 10 artifacts in One Step from Eden. But really quick, before we jump into the video, it would be super duper if you would actually subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate it a lot. Every individual one matters, and it counts. As you can see, you're a relatively large percentage of my subscriber base whenever you hit that button, at least comparatively to other YouTubers. Like when these people got a million, like, you know, do they notice 1,000,001? But I noticed the difference between 657 and 658. So I do notice each individual thing. But anyway, let's jump into it. So the way we're going to structure it today is I'm going to pull out my controller because it's slightly easier to control the menus, I think, in this game with controller. We're going to choose 2 from each rarity. So I wanted to be able to give you something that would be kind of applicable throughout the entire, you know, through your runs. You'd be able to use this as kind of a guide for your run. So we're not going to go the objectively 10 strongest, as it would probably be a little weighted heavily in the really hard to find ones. So we're going to pick 2 from every rarity, and there's 4 rarities, and then we're going to pick the top 2 in my opinion. So we're going to jump right into it. So here at the common level, the ones I think this one is probably going to actually be the easiest out of all of them. I think the 2 strongest at common level has got to be Hitseeker, as we're going to put that at number, I guess, 10. 10% chance to launch a 40 damage missile when a spell hits an enemy. So obviously 10% chance when a spell hits an enemy is not that high. However, there's a lot of spells that hit lots of times, such as, you know, minigun. We're going to mention minigun a lot in this playthrough. Things if you're doing kunai builds, right? You're casting a bunch of spells. Things like waterfall, once they get going, hit a bunch of times. And I think even flames can proc this too. Every hit of the flame, I think, has a chance to proc this. The point is, you're hitting the enemies a lot with a lot of things, and it's just really, really powerful. You know, 40 damage is a lot of damage, and basically, you know, it just adds 4 damage. It's kind of like 4 spell power in a way, because 10% of the time you're going to be doing 40 more damage. So on average, you know, 1 out of 10 times you're going to do 40. So on average, you can do 4 more damage per hit. But that is a ton, especially when you have things that hit a bunch. Hitseeker's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty good. I like it. It's something that you basically always pick up whenever you see it. Other than Hitseeker, I'm not going to really do honorable mentions, even though there's a couple I want to mention. But the other one I'm going to mention is Glass Cannon. And in a way, this is very similar to Hitseeker, right? It's kind of like a 4 spell power. This one is literally 4 spell power and 1 fragile, while Hitseeker is, in a way, kind of could be seen as a 4 spell power. This one does have a downside of 1 fragile at the start of battle, but let's be honest, 1 fragile is nothing. That is like no downside. This might as well say 4 spell power. That's it. The one fragile in some situations can be a positive, right? Fragile makes you take, I think, 50% more damage the next time you get hit. So there are very few times, like maybe if you're going to fight the shopkeeper who does, like, you know, 500 damage a hit, this might get you killed. But most of the time, it just is, the downside's really not there at all. And the upside of 4 spell power, it's 4 extra damage on every spell you cast for the rest of the game, right? It's really good. It's actually more than that. It's every hit that a spell does 4 extra damage, and that adds up really quick. Obviously, kunai, minigun, things like that, very, very powerful. It's not going to break your run. You're not going to be insanely just instantly win because of this, but it's just something that's like at the common level, you basically always want it, in my opinion. And that's going to be it for commons. Let's go to, I think we're going to call them rares, epics, and legendaries. We're going to go the Hearthstone route because that's what I could think about here. And we're going to go with, I think Double Edge is just a worse version of, which is weird. That's 4 spell power, lose 4 defense. I'd rather gain 1 fragile probably. But maybe 4 defense isn't as bad. We're not talking about that one right now, though. Bismuth. Gain 3 shield when you cast the spell. Now, there's no doubt, this is just, you're gonna notice a lot of things about my opinions here is, spell mashing a lot of spells. Because throughout the run, you're gonna be getting a lot of, probably the, 0.1 mana up, other mana up things, you know, mana regen things, and you're gonna be getting a lot of cheap spells, and eventually by the end of the run, you're gonna be able to mash things, and you know, just cast your spells as fast as you can, or you're gonna have a lot of cheap spells. It's very rare you have like 2 or 3 really expensive spells. You don't get to cast that many spells. And in that situation, obviously Bismuth is not that good. But when you have a ton of spells and you're casting them like crazy, Bismuth is just like insane, right? You're almost invincible, especially in kunai builds. It's really good with a lot of things. Like, most decks could just mash a lot of spells at the end. You know, if you have a bunch of 1 to 2 mana things, you got a couple mana regen things, especially like some of the artifacts we're going to be talking about later. Really good. Bunch of HP, you know, shield. It's true, frost and poison and fire damage will go through the shields. I think fire also goes through the shields. I guess that's a good question. I don't really think about it that much, but it's a bunch of HP, right? It keeps you safe, keeps you alive. It doesn't actually help you win any faster, but it lets you absorb and be more aggressive in your play. Number 2 at this rare rank. There's a lot, honestly. Like, it's tough to pick too. Like, I love so many of these. I love Merit Badge. I love Power Shard. Honestly, I even love Undershirt and Shield Battery. And Panther Habit's great. But we're gonna go with, for number 2, Card Thrower. Deal 20 damage to a random enemy when you consume a card. Now, this one is definitely more situational, no doubt. You don't just take this on every single run always. I mean, I probably would take it on every single run always, but this is incredibly good if you have a jam deck going, right? You just get a bunch of jams in your deck. You can also find, sometimes you can find gelatin, right? There's a bunch, you can find blueberry jam, make jams cost 1, grant you 20 shield, and do 20 damage whenever you do it. That's like insane, right? And there's a lot of cards that synergize with jams just in general. But beyond just jam, there's also, you have the ability to upgrade like things with consume, heal 5 HP. So if you have something that's like a pretty decent shot, I don't know, just like you have a normal spell, it's not you don't want to get it a bunch, but you want to just cast it once. Maybe it's something like Phalanx, or maybe it's even just something like I don't know, Kinetic Wave, where you don't need it a bunch, but it's kind of, you know, you get to consume it, gain 5 permanent life. This also does 20 damage. So there's a lot of ways to get consume on things, but I'm telling you, Kunai is insane. It doubles the damage, essentially. It's almost like Kunai's Apply Fragile, except it's more flexible, and it's untargetable. You don't even need to hit with the Kunai. And Kunais do, I think, 30 damage, and this adds 20 damage to each Kunai, which is really good. It's not quite as synergistic with Power Shard because it's 2 separate sources of damage. But this thing will put your damage through the roof in specific builds. Definitely one you want to watch out for. And this is one of those artifacts that if you see it early enough on, it's just like, oh, this is the kind of run I'm doing. And even later in a run, you can be like, oh, I'm switching to do a Kunai run. Because in order to do a Kunai run, really all you need is the Kunai ring, the Collector's Ring, I think it's called. And there's a few other Kunai things, but you don't really need them. You really only need the Collector's Ring. And this can win you a run on its own, especially if you have Bismuth, right? Super synergistic together. All right, let's move on to the Epic. And obviously, when you guys disagree with me, which you will, I guarantee a lot of you will, let me know what you think is the most powerful artifacts, because this is going to be one of the more controversial ones, probably. I am not going to include Dual Disc, which a lot of people consider the very best in the deck, because mashing is really good. This makes mashing instant, and you know, the shuffles are instant, and it adds jams, which are already not that bad, especially if you're using other great artifacts. And I do think Dual Disc is fantastic. I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that it's not. I'm just not putting it at my number. I'm not putting it on this list. I'm gonna put, very similar to Bismuth, very similar to my last two, you're gonna see it, Meatshield, which is a combination. It's Bismuth combined with Card Thrower, right? This is every time you consume a card, deal 20 damage. Whenever you cast a spell, gain 3 shield. This is literally what if they had a baby. Gain 20 shield whenever you consume a card. So every single Kunai will grant you 20 shield. Every single thing that, you know, Phalanx will grant you an additional 20 shield. It's just a straight up, you know, it's like an upgrade, a permanent upgrade to that card. 20 shield is a lot. It's a really good amount, especially if you're doing something where you can cast a lot of spells. But even if you can't, things that just consume and increase your max HP, things that just consume because they're really good spells, like right, like I think it's Sunshine, just any of like the rainbow spells that are really good. It's just 20 shields a lot. It gives you a ton of HP. It makes you a tanky motherfucker, and it's really, really hard to die with that on. And then number 2 we're gonna put here, I mean, that one's pretty self-explanatory, but Chalice. So I was actually trying to choose between Chalice and Virtue down here. Restore 1 mana if idle for 1 second. They're both, I think, nearly equally as good, but I think 1 mana every 1 second, if you stand still, is slightly worse than 1 mana a second whenever your mana is below 1, because when you're using your spells constantly and keeping yourself at 0, this will just keep refreshing, and you don't have to stand still for this effect. Ideally, it doesn't really matter which one you take, I don't think, but I think Chalice edges it out just a little bit. 1 mana regen while mana is below 1 is perfect for, you're gonna notice, like, very rarely are you gonna be doing slow, calculated, cast this spell and cast this spell in this specific order to make sure this happens. Like, it'll happen, especially when you're using like an Echo and you don't wanna have Echo consumed by randomly double casting a jam or something, right? But a lot of times when you're getting later, you're trying to get as much mana regen as possible, because the faster you can cast spells, the more your damage output is. And the more your damage output is, the less damage you're taking, because you don't need to worry about dodging for as long, right? You have less time for things to go wrong. And Chalice lets you kind of keep up your maneuverability while you're doing that, while the other one, which I would take every single time, basically still, Virtue I would take basically every time, is just slightly worse, I would say. But maybe the math works out where it's not that way. Let me know what you guys feel. And now we're going to get to Legendary. And Legendary here I have at number, I guess number 4 is the 4th best artifact, I would probably say, is Pet Dragon. A dragon that shoots fireballs and leaves flames when it casts a spell. Again, when you get into the late game of this game, you're going to be casting spells really fast most of the time with most characters, right? And this just adds extra damage to every single hit. It's very similar to the Consume. It's very similar to Card Throw, right? It does 20 damage whenever you consume a card, except this does extra damage every time you cast a spell, whether or not it gets consumed. So it doesn't care about how much you how much you consume. It doesn't care what kind of spells you cast. It's just absolutely insane. A lot of extra damage. Flames are very, very powerful, as you will see coming up, I think. And outside of that, we're gonna go right next door. We're gonna go ninjutsu. So pets get a little bit of a debuff in my mind. Like, most pets are garbage. But the fact that you can hit triangle and have them share, or whatever, not triangle, for me it's Y, but whatever your remove spell button would be, and have them share a square, helps them keep them alive, is really, really good. There are some good pets, but a lot of them are pretty garbage, like, no doubt. But flames, insanely powerful. The damage deal is powerful. Now, ninjutsu. Add a kunai to your deck when you hit a target with a kunai. This just means you don't ever need to reload if you have kunai. This is exceptionally good against most bosses, especially if you're like Chrono Saffron, right? You slow down time. You just have time stop or time slow. Time stop doesn't work that well. Time slow does work really well because it has to hit them, and then you get the kunai back, essentially. But this kind of lets you just like machine gun, right? Without ever having to reload until you miss, and then you would have to reload. But, you know, same thing we've been talking about a lot. Whenever you cast a spell, X happens. Whenever you consume a spell, 20 extra damage. Whenever you consume a spell, 20 shield. Whenever you consume a spell or cast a spell, you know, do this extra damage, hit Seeker, do this much with Bismuth. Pet Dragon shoots flames. Whenever you cast a spell, anything is usually going to be some of the most powerful stuff in the game. So keep that in mind. This just gives you infinite kunai if you keep hitting with them. Obviously some bosses are a bit more mobile, a little hard to hit with. It could be a little bit harder to hit, but it's insane. I put it at number 3 at the third most powerful artifact in the game. Even though it's, again, we're not talking about general goodness. Like, Thorn is generally better, and no matter what deck you have, right? If you don't have kunai, this does nothing. But it's so powerful. It's like it's hard to lose when you have ninjutsu, right? If you have kunai in your deck as well, because even if you have one or two kunai generators in your deck, and the rest of your deck is a bunch of stuff, eventually you'll get through it. And then at the end of your deck rotation, you know, before you have to shuffle, you'll just have a couple kunai, and you can just mash those again and again and again and again, paired to something like Pet Dragon, or paired with something that gives you spell power, or like Hit Seeker. You're going to be doing insane amounts of damage, and no boss can stand up to it. All right, so we did 2 at every rarity. We're gonna go up to the top 2 now. What are the top 2 most powerful artifacts in Purplatypus's opinion? All right, number 2 at the second most powerful artifact. We're coming all the way back down here, and we're going to Thermite. You guys might have thought I missed this one. Thermite. Flame damage reduces target's defense by 1. So this is kind of like every time you do, flame deals damage like every half second to 1 second. I think it's a half second. I think it hits 2 times every second. This is like saying whenever you hit someone with flame, which is already good. So Anima's already good because this needs flame to be good. Anima's already insane because frost is insane, and frost is insane, and fire is insane. It's all good. The thunder stuff is you can let go. There's a lot of flame stuff that is pretty bad, but there's a lot of flame stuff that is insane, right? The Ring of Fire, the fire rain, whatever, you know, it's like Blizzard, but it leaves flames everywhere. This kind of says, whenever you deal flame damage to a target, gain 1 spell power for the rest of that fight. That's kind of what it is saying here, if you want to translate it to that. But it reduces their defense, sorry, for the rest of the fight by 1, which means every time you hit them, you're gonna do 1 extra damage, and it's like 2 a second. Imagine if you have like Ring of Fire, or even like, you know, Carpet Bomb, or anything where bosses are hitting it a bunch. Like you're gaining potentially, especially like against the wall where they don't move, you're gaining like 2, 3, 4 fucking spell power every 1 or 2 seconds. Your damages goes through the roof. Thermite is insane for damage. And so if this had something like every time poison damage, you deal poison damage, target's defense is reduced by 1, this would be significantly worse, and this would not be a top 2. The reason it's a top 2 is not only is the effect insanely strong, but it synergizes with flame. Poison only hits about once a second, every 2 seconds. I don't remember the exact time, but it's really long and slow. So this would take much, much longer to actually scale. And poison is significantly worse than flame in general. Anima is much better than misery, right? There's just so many spells. If you double focus Anima, you're likely gonna win anyway, because the stuff is so good there. And this compounds the amazingness that is Anima. Obviously, if you have Thermite early on, you're probably gonna be going fire. You pair it with things like Molten Core, which I didn't put up here. It is really good. And again, like Molten Core is better than like Hit Seeker a lot of times. Maybe not Hit Seeker, but it's better than Bismuth, but it's epic, not rare. So we pick 2 from each rarity to kind of keep it so you can use this throughout your entirety of the run, right? But Thermite, yes, insanely powerful. And at number 1, I don't know if you guys are going to be surprised if you watch my videos. Number 1, Pet Kitty, right here. Now, Pet Kitty is so powerful, I don't even think it's close. I think as good as Thermite is, as number 2 in my opinion, Pet Kitty is like twice as good or more. Like, Pet Kitty is a kitty that fires frost shots 3 ways when you cast the spell. So it fires it forward, and it fires 2 diagonal shots like the V-gun. Now this does 5 damage when it hits, but it applies frost. Every 3rd hit does 150 damage. If you have something like, this is just every 3rd spell you cast deals an extra 150 damage. That's like 50 extra spell power essentially in this alone, right? It's actually more. It's like 55 additional spell power, right? Because you do 5 extra damage. It does 5 damage a hit, and then every 3rd hit, it does an additional 150. This is very similar to getting 50 additional spell power. The only times it's not is if something like minigun, things that are multi-hit, it doesn't work the same way as spell power, right? 50 spell damage on minigun would be much more powerful than what Kitty's effect actually gives you. But for things like, for like a kunai, it's effectively exactly that. It's sometimes even more powerful. Against the wall, it's even more powerful than 50 spell power, because if you go in the bottom right corner or the top right corner, like you're as close as you can get to the wall and you're at the very top or very bottom, not only will it hit with the straight frost, it'll hit with the diagonal frost too, hitting twice, which is just insane. This thing just, Kitty lights up bosses. The only thing that Kitty's bad at is it can die, but it has more HP than you do most of the time. So typically if you have it share a square, you're gonna die before Kitty does. It does insane amounts of damage. Your damage goes through the roof. I can't even explain it any other way. In my opinion, this is easily the best artifact in the game by a long shot. Now you could probably make arguments for specific situations where other things are better. On Hell Pass 14, right, the hardest difficulty where you start with 1 maximum HP, Transcendence is probably better in that situation, right? And maybe in like a specific fight, maybe against like tier, the max tier Terra, maybe Wings or Granite is better for that a specific fight. Like, you might be able to come up with fringe situations where things are better, but Pet Kitty is like hands down, like if you just get it, I don't think I've lost a run where I've gotten Pet Kitty. Like, I've been close to losing, and then Pet Kitty's like, okay, our damage is so high, it no longer is relevant. So that's gonna get number 1 in my book. And guys, that's gonna actually, that was all of them. That was all 10. So let me know what you thought about the list. Let me know what you think what you think is ridiculous for me putting on there, what you think I missed and I'm overlooking. I wouldn't be surprised to say a lot of people, Uranium should be on there. Maybe Merit Badge should be on there. I want to hear your guys' opinions. Also, if you enjoyed it, I would love it if you subscribed. My personal goal is still to get to 1,000 by Christmas time, basically, by the end of the year. And if we can't do that still, I want to see how high we can get. Really loving Eden still. Let me know if there's any other games you guys think I should check out or make guides for. I was playing Ghost of Tsushima, but I'm all done with that now. You're going to be seeing those videos come out on YouTube for the next couple weeks here. But I'm going to start picking up a different game. I'm going to be playing Eden constantly, of course. But it is a secondary game. I'm looking at a different roguelike that I could really get into, just like I have Eden. And we'll talk about it, make it work. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought, why I'm stupid. And for platypuses, for Plat-a-pus, I'll see you next time.